Yeah, running backs. I love DeMarco Murray this week.
Yeah, we're on the same page there.
Yeah, they're just everything. He is. There's top 3 running backs in the NFL. He's one of the top 3, maybe top 4 because we got to include Bell in there. But
Sure.
He's just not performing the way that this guy is. And
DeMarco Murray's great.
Last week too.
DeMarco Murray's great.
Yeah. So.
And that's a good young football team.
Do what now?
That's a good young football team in Tennessee.
Yeah, it is. He got 20 points against Indy the last time they played.
Yeah. I don't want them to start believing their own hype, but that's a good team.
Yeah, I like him. I also I really like LeGarrette Blount this week just for the matchup. You see what he's doing. He's actually surprising. The guy's a beast. San Francisco is horrible against the run, horrible against opposing points to the running back. So that's just a matchup I like. Plus, I like the value. I also really like Theo Riddick this week against your shitty Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, I do too.
For the same reason. So depending on if I went Aaron Rodgers, I can go LeGarrette Blount, Theo Riddick, and then stack my wide receivers.
Okay, the wide receiver stack jumps in.
Yeah.
Give me the number 1 running back on your list. Is it going to be DeMarco Murray?
It's going to be DeMarco, yeah. Just for his consistency and his overall, every now and again LeGarrette Blount can get shut out. I don't think he's going to this week, but you just never know. Sometimes the offense just goes through different positions. But with Gronk being out, I think it'll still be the same game plan. You got to beat San Francisco with the run. They're pretty good against the pass.
Yeah, I do. I think that could be the hit or miss in San Francisco where New England is there. You never know what Belichick is going to do. You just don't know who he's going to give the ball to. Dion Lewis is back this week, but it looks like a limited role. He may even be inactive come Sunday, so I wouldn't worry too much about Dion Lewis hawking any of those touches. Possibly James White, but you never really know, and it's so hard to sleep on a LeGarrette Blount when he's just so red hot. I'll tell you who I love this week. I'm with you in the DeMarco Murray category, and that's a high-dollar player at $8,500. He's right up there. I think you almost have to include either a DeMarco Murray or a Le'Veon Bell this week. I think you have to include one of the two. The matchups are just so sweet.
Yeah, I agree.
You can't be out of the mix. As a running back number 2 for me, I love LaShawn McCoy.
Yeah, you're high on him this year, aren't you?
I am. I think he's an incredible player. I really do. I think he's a great player. I think you can get a lot of value out of him this week. And he would be my RB2 in a FanDuel play if I had that opportunity. But skipping through McCoy and Murray being 1-2 with Bell being 1A, my number 3, and I'm pretty sure you've given this guy a sniff here too, is just C.J. Proceeds, the rookie out of Notre Dame.
Yeah, I like him this week. I like the fact that they committed. Thomas Rawls is probably going to get like 8 carries.
Sure.
That means everything else. And you saw that guy Proceeds was actually a wide receiver. That's the reason why he was so badass catching the ball.
Yeah, he can play. He can play. I wonder what they were sitting on him for all this time.
He's another guy to think about at 5,900, Jeremy Hill.
Yeah, he looked really good Monday night against the Giants, by the way.
Buffalo's 20th against the rush.
Yeah.
They've had 11 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, that Cincinnati team they're desperate to win a football game. That division in the North is up for grabs, with the exception of the Cleveland Browns. Yeah, Cincinnati needs to win a game, and I think sometimes when you need to win a game, you take pressure off your quarterback. You let the running game do it. I like the Jeremy Hill sniff. Good job.
And you know what I also like about Jeremy Hill, if you've noticed, a lot of these guys that have pretty prolific passing games, whether it's in New England or I saw it the other night with Seattle, there's lots of pass interference calls being given. That's why a lot of these guys, the running back is pretty much the stud this year, and the wide receiver's a little quieter than normal. It's kind of been reversed from last year.
Yeah.
So,
I hadn't noticed. I'll pay a little bit more attention.
I mean, that's just off the top of my head. It might be a made-up stat in my mind.
Could be.
But
sure.
I noticed all these guys that are just coming out of nowhere with these huge 2-touchdown games, and they don't
make up shit all the time. That's quite very possible.
Yeah, and they don't really they don't seem to have overall. They're not having Zeke Elliott days to where they're not these massive rushing totals.
Yeah, he's going to stick out in everybody's head because he's just the big bopper and the big popper, man. That offensive line in Dallas is pretty incredible as well. How do you feel about guys like Robert Kelly?
I think he's going to, he would be a good, I don't know if I want to put him in my fantasy daily lineup, but, I have him in our standard league, and I don't have a problem even starting him in this week. But
I don't like that he's not much of a pass catcher.
No, and that team is, their running backs haven't done anything all year, even when
Matt
they've
Jones stinks.
had good games. Yeah, so they just don't seem to have a prolific ground game, period.
While I'm at it, I'll go ahead and piss off a large portion of our listener base here in the Bay Area, and I'm going to say that Matt Jones is a typical Florida Gator in the NFL. Just doesn't pan out. Yeah, he stinks. He runs backwards. Ball control issues are ridiculous. No vision. Matt Jones stinks. He'll be out of the NFL in another season.
I think it's been, like I said, it's been since Alfred Morris before you would start a Redskin running back, I think, in this daily fantasy, that's for sure.
Yeah, you're probably right. So Robert Kelly's just a guy whose name keeps popping up, and I wouldn't start him. I wouldn't touch him either. But to get started on this one, I'm not afraid to go DeMarco Murray, C.J. Proceeds with Marcus Mariota on this lineup here.
Yeah, I wouldn't have a problem with that. And like I said, I'd like a little more of what I think Hill or really Theo Riddick, if I'm going to pick out of the guys that I've offered as my number 2. Theo Riddick has a little more upside. He's hit or miss, but when he's hit, he's 25 points. So
yeah, when he's hit, it's really sweet, actually, very sweet. Guys like Frank Gore are also somebody else you may not want to overlook at 6,300. He's still week in, week out.
This week.
Say it again?
He's a very good play this week.
Yeah, week in and week out, Frank Gore is going to get his close to 20 touches. He's going to bulldog the ball, and if this team gets inside the 10, the 5, 6, this guy is your bulldog. He's going to get you the goal line touchdowns.
He's not going to get you 30 points, but if you start him, you're going to try to get those points from another position.
That's it. You're going to get a little bit of value at him. Last week I believe he was under the 6,000 mark, or 2 weeks ago rather, and according to my notes, and now he's just up over 60 or at 63. That might be a little too high for what you're shooting at. So again, guys like Jeremy Hill, good plays. I like it. I think that's a good sniff right there. Last week I was lucky enough to sneak Ryan Matthews into my lineup in a few places, and it certainly didn't hurt. But again, when he's coupled with Lance Kendricks and J.J. Nelson, I can just go ahead and wipe my ass with that sheet.
Yeah, that pisses you off. That's the guy you start, and he doesn't do anything, and the next week he goes off. You want to go?
Yeah, it's so typical. So moving forward, man, I'm a little running back heavy here, and I'm going to make an adjustment and make sure that I bust in the C.J. Procyse. Although all of a sudden the cat's out of the bag with this kid. But let's move on to wide receivers.
Man, again, there's a plethora. If you can afford it, Antonio Brown, Cleveland is horrible for the wide receiver against the pass.
Sure.
But let's assume you don't have the money. Jordy Nelson, another good play.
He had a monster week last week.
I think it's going to continue. I think it's going to continue. I just overall, I like I'd mentioned, I like the situation that they're in with not having a ground game and not having a very good defense. So it makes the overall, someone's got to catch the ball. He's getting a ridiculous number of looks each week. So I like him. I really like T.Y. Hilton this week. I
do too.
Focusing on that game and the over-under, and it just screams that he's going to have a big week. He had a huge week.
It does.
Now Moncrief is more healthy, so I think that just bodes better for him because it's,
I like the sneaky side of Dante Moncrief this week.
Yeah. He went awful last time. He had 12 targets, 7 catches, 133 yards, and a touchdown.
I like that underneath sneaky side. I got no problem with Moncrief. I've downgraded a few players. that I would have normally probably had a little bit higher. I'm fading anybody from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers playing that Chiefs defense in Kansas City. I had seen and heard some of the experts this week that really love the Winston and Mike Evans stack this week, and I think those guys are out of their mind.
Well, statistically, Kansas City is pretty bad against points for the wide receiver. But
yeah, I don't like any of it.
If Mike Evans couldn't do it against Chicago at home, then why would he do it against Kansas City away?
That is the loudest stadium in the NFL. These are two young players. These are two young players coming off a distraction. I don't like anything Tampa Bay this week.
No, I'm with you on that. I don't have a problem missing them. I do like Allen Robinson, and I know that comes into your anti.
Yeah, but he had a monster day last week. I get it.
He's getting the looks. If you look at the last, he's had 25, 40 reception or targets in the last 3 games.
Yeah, 13, 12, and 15. Yeah, he's definitely getting the looks. 9 catches, 107 yards, and a touchdown last week. 9 catches is a monster day.
It is. And again, against opposing wide receivers, Detroit is 17th overall. So they've got a little better, but I see it, points being put on the board. And Allen Hurns is just horrible this year.
Yeah, can't catch.
No game, so
I watched him drop a really nice throw from Bortles. It was a touch pass over in the corner for a big first down on 3rd and long. I mean, Bortles put it right in the basket, and it just slipped through his hands. And when those things start happening, you just know the whole team's poised for a meltdown. Sadly, the quarterback stats reflect the bad play of wide receivers sometimes too. And maybe I'm a little bit too hard on Bortles, but probably not. But I like the Allen Robinson play this week. As much as Bortles scares me, I like the Robinson play.
Yeah, like I said, I think he's pretty much the only offensive weapon they have that's worth starting outside of Bortles. So I have him in a couple stacks with Bortles.
Okay, let's keep marching along with some of these wide receivers because, like you said, there is a shit ton of wide receivers available.
You know who I like, too, is I like Steve Smith this week.
Buddy, I like Steve Smith every week.
I knew you would, buddy. I think what
my
you have
personal
to do,
hero.
I think, Dallas is susceptible to the pass. We saw that last week. And I think that, points are going to be scored, and they're not going to be able to run the ball too well, Baltimore. So, and he's getting his looks. I mean, the guy is incredible. So again,
he's like 63 years old.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think he's going to have 25 points, but I think he could have 15 or 17. So as a number 3 wide receiver, I have no problem starting him, and that's all depending on if you went heavy with your running back or not, of course. Because if you went Blunt and Riddick, or even a combination with Jeremy Hill in that mix, then you can afford 3 studs. You can afford a T.Y. and Nelson and a Robinson that's, in the same lineup. So it all depends on where you go with that.
If I've ever in my entire life had a man crush, it was Steve Smith.
He's a badass, dude. He's a badass. He brings it every time. He's not afraid. He's not afraid of anyone. He's a little dude, and he's tougher than nails. Yeah,
the biggest heart from a professional athlete I've ever seen. Just keeps coming, and you talk about a guy who's he writes his own script week in and week out. Last year when and I won't go too long into this, but I say that a lot. He blew out his Achilles last year, and I remember watching him, get carried off the field, thinking to myself, that is not the way Steve Smith retires. And then this year when I read he's coming back, I said that's more like it. You don't tell Steve Smith when it's time to quit.
Well, but didn't you think he was just going to be some bit player? I thought this would be.
No, I drafted him in 3 leagues.
He's actually producing at a high level for all things, considering.
I drafted him in 3 leagues because I believed that if this guy feels like he can physically come back, then he was going to come back and he was going to play well. Now, you feel like that a lot. I feel like I'm going to do things physically pretty well, and then I disappoint my old ass and go, oh, that's what you get. But no, I had a lot of faith in him. I really did. But again, man crush. I'm blinded by the light that is Steve Smith.
There's no problem with that, man.
It's hard to argue with. So carrying on, man, we like the Allen Robinson. We like Steve Smith. I'm with you. I like Steve Smith quite a bit.
Yeah. So, and then I mean, there's other guys to like. Like I said,
how do you feel about Golden Tate at home? He's been real good at home this year.